Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're here today with Husain Haqqani, the new Pakistani ambassador to the United States. Thank you for being with us. I'm Justine Rosenthal, editor of the National Interest. We're hoping to give our viewers a brief overview of what's going on in Pakistan right now, in particular with the changeover in the government. So if you give us a sense of what that means, and also some of the talk we've heard lately that Pakistan could in fact become a failed state during this transition period, how real do you think that is?
After the elections of February 18th, 2008, Pakistan is in the process of a transformation from authoritarianism to democracy, a transformation from a culture of militancy that has been fostered over several decades to a culture of entrepreneurship and inclusion of the people, and at the same time a transformation in an outlook towards the region. Pakistan always looked upon itself as sitting at the crossroads of conflict between the Middle East, Central Asia and South Asia, but rather now wants to look at itself as sitting at the crossroads of opportunity. I think if there was any prospect of Pakistan's state not rising to the challenges that faced it, I think now is the moment to be optimistic. Because instead of moving in the direction of being a failed state, Pakistan is now coming back from the brink in the economic sphere, in the political sphere, and also strategically, changing its attitude towards extremism, making sure that the Pakistani people understand that the extremist jihadis are a threat as much to Pakistan's own security as they are to Pakistan's international allies. Pakistan is also working towards mending fences with India, developing a close relationship with Afghanistan, and acquiring that internal strength that has eluded Pakistan over the last 61 years.
Let me, if I may, talk a little bit about the jihadis that you mentioned in this. We heard a lot of argument during the Musharraf regime that one of the difficulties of cracking down on the jihadists was that it was going to weaken the internal structure of the state. My sense from hearing you on previous occasions is that you now believe the government is going to take a tougher stance and is already taking a tougher stance. Was Musharraf's sense of the extremist role in the country incorrect?
I think that it would not be appropriate for me to comment on General Musharraf and his stance. Rather, it's important for me to explain the government's stance. The government of Pakistan recognizes, the leadership in Pakistan today recognizes that the greatest threat to Pakistan comes from extremism, from violent jihadism, from non-state actors that are under nobody's control and are armed to the teeth, people who send children into war as suicide bombers. These people actually threaten Pakistan's the way of life that Pakistanis have known for centuries. It challenges the state as well. And so the government's decision now is that instead of thinking of some jihadis as good jihadis and other jihadis as bad jihadis, we will look upon these extremists as a threat to Pakistan's security and deal with them. Of course we will deal with them in a strategic manner, in a sequential manner, but we will deal with all of them.
Can we talk a little about the federally administered tribal areas? And obviously there's a difference between dealing with a group like Lashkar-e-Taiba and with dealing with some of the Taliban that are in Fatah. How is the government planning to address that?
The government has a multi-pronged strategy towards the federally administered tribal areas. These are areas that are very remote, they are also very poor. In fact, people who have nothing to look forward to are more likely to be drawn into an extremist movement like the Taliban or Al-Qaeda than people who actually have a life ahead of them. So, the plan is for political integration of the tribal areas with the rest of the country, providing of economic opportunities there and a massive socio-economic package for the region, and at the same time, very methodical military and intelligence strategies to isolate the extremists. The strategy has been implemented so far. There have been successful military operations in Khyber and Bajor, which are 2 of the 7 tribal agencies in that area. And the rest of the tribal agencies too will witness military action that will ensure that the most hardline of the extremists are eliminated, while the rest are persuaded to join the political and social mainstream.
Now, how much of that can Pakistan do on its own how much help will it need from the Americans, and then how much help does it want?
Pakistan will not be able to accomplish the greater goal of eliminating terrorism all on its own. Pakistan will need economic and military assistance. Pakistan will also need assistance with assuring Pakistan's neighbors that Pakistan has changed, because it's not easy for our neighbors to believe that Pakistan could undergo such a transformation in the short term. So Pakistan looks at the United States as an ally, a strategic partner, and we look forward to inputs that will enable Pakistan to develop ourselves, strengthen our economy, achieve internal cohesion and strength, develop Pakistan's democracy further, and at the same time have the security and the military apparatus that is needed for the kind of war that has been imposed upon us by the terrorists.
We heard during Obama's campaign, I think, some of his toughest talk on Pakistan. Is your sense that that stance has continued, that there are changes because the Pakistani government is changing? Some of his talk about cross-border raids. What's the sense of the Pakistani government now?
I think that one should just let election rhetoric be considered as election rhetoric. As far as policy is concerned, the most sensible policy towards Pakistan's tribal areas is to strengthen Pakistan's ability to deal with the people on its side of the border. The United States does not need to overextend itself militarily. Pakistan has a very strong military. We have a military that, with correct training and good equipment, can actually take on the terrorists and eliminate them, and at the same time provide strength to Afghanistan and enable it to attain the levels of stability that it has been seeking. So I think the US and Pakistan will be partners in the war against terror under President Obama, and Pakistan, Afghanistan and the United States will work together to make sure that the border areas between Pakistan and Afghanistan are no longer a safe haven for anyone.
We get to, I think, what will probably be our final question. There was a fairly large story in the New York Times a couple of days ago by David Singer on nuclear weapons in Pakistan, how secure they were, whether or not the terrorists might have access to them, whether there would be rogue elements within the government who would be passing on information. I don't know if you saw this, but it's a question that everyone has about Pakistan anyway. How is the government beginning to address this? Is there a possibility of addressing it? And do you think that the threat of rogue nuclear weapons from Pakistan is real?
I think that this is one of those questions that is routine but has become a cliche. The fact of the matter is that Pakistan has a very strong and methodical command and control system for its nuclear weapons. Pakistan's nuclear weapons are under the control of its lawfully constituted government, and there is no question of any non-state actors acquiring either material or nuclear weapons. In any case, nuclear weapons are not toys that can be stolen from the toy bin. Much of this speculation essentially comes from piecing together various elements of stories that relate more to the past than they do to the present and the future. There was a network led by one of Pakistan's nuclear scientists, Dr. Aqil Khan, which has since been put out of business. The US intelligence knows it, Pakistani intelligence knows it, the international community knows it. Having been a journalist, I understand the need for a story, and one of the best ways to produce the story is to rehash an old one. But the truth is that Pakistan's nuclear weapons are essentially for Pakistan's security. They are in safe hands, and there is no question of them falling into the hands of non-state actors of any variety.
And you believe that this government now has a good working relationship with the military and with intelligence, that we're not looking at the potential historical trend in Pakistan of a military coup or similar over the next few years?
Pakistan's democratically elected government has been able to come to office with the full support of Pakistan's military. The military and the intelligence services are working as part of one government. Of course, in a country where there have been military coups in the past, people will always worry about a future military coup. But I think the Pakistani military understands that it is in Pakistan's interest to let democracy work.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.